Hello, how are you today?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm
Welcome everyone to
fine.
second day of this exciting powwow.
Thank
I'm
you.
really happy to be here, and I'm really enjoying the conference as well. So, yes.
Oh, I appreciate it. So I leave it up to you, and we see you at the end of the speech, okay?
Very much. So, are you gonna share the slides, right? So
Yes,
I'm gonna
we are.
just wait for it first. Perfect. So, hello everyone. So I'm gonna be presenting today the intersection of games and responsible fashion. So, next slide. So first of all, a few words of introduction. I'm fashion researcher and I'm specializing in sustainability, consumer behavior, and technology. I have been involved in the fashion business for last 20 years, and I have in this adventure the opportunity to see different sides of the industry. I started off in computer science. However, after the first year, I was scouted and I was working as a fashion model. I was suitcases for a few years. Then I decided to settle down and in London when I was working as a shoot producer, and I was also a casting director for London Fashion Week. However, at the last years, like last 6 years of 6 years ago, I realized how much the fashion industry is changing for worse, and I didn't really wanted to add more to this. So I recognized that and combined my primary passion, computer science, with fashion. So I have started exploring the boundaries of how technology can motivate and drive change to more responsible fashion future. I'm a founder of a project called iClite, where we are concentrating how and which technological innovation can drive sustainable fashion consumption. And also creating a game now, game called Portobello, which is a part of iCloud. And this is also a base of my academic research. And here I'm trying to understand if and how games can help us to consume fashion in a more responsible way. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it at the end of the presentation. So next, please. So I will start the presentation with explanation what fashion is. First of all, what is current state and what consumer wants. Then I will talk about, can you go back? I will talk about responsible fashion, and I will present fusion in fashion space, including how fashion is heavily adopting game industry, and talk you through behavior change solution. So yes, so let's talk about fashion because it's such a big part of our culture. It's also something that every person can relate to, as we all wear clothes, at least most of the time, hopefully. Next slide, please. So fashion is a business that is concentrating on novelty and innovation. We have haute couture, craftsmanship, and bespoke items on one side, and fast fashion, which means high volumes of low-cost clothing imitating high-end designers' collection on the other. Next slide. So fashion is also a communication tool, and thanks to it, we can express ourselves. And even if you think you are not into fashion, however, I think most of us here in this conference do care about fashion, people will have a perception of you simply by just looking at you, and even subconsciously will be judged, and our appearance will be judged. Next slide, please. Fashion is one of the most polluting industry, and the complexity of the clothing industry has a significant footprint on the exploitation of both natural resources and people working in extremely poor conditions. So while we're thinking about fashion, we need to think about all the pesticides used in farming, the toxic dyes used in manufacturing, the large amount of natural resources used in the whole clothing chain. And there's also a growing problem of the overconsumption of fashion and waste management, and the significant proportion of garment, even now in current situation, are purchased on impulse and are never worn. And can you imagine that there is almost 92 million tons of textiles waste created every single year, and most of it, unfortunately, ends up in landfill. And there is almost 8 billion people on the planet, right? So we all need clothing, and therefore it is really critical that we reduce those impact and make fashion more sustainable. And those visuals are from the True Cost movie, and if you haven't seen it and want to learn a little bit more about the subject, I highly recommend it. Next slide, please. Furthermore, the pandemic exposed many challenges, and despite such a high consumption rate, we could notice many shops closing around the world and going bankrupt. Revenues have drastically declined for many fashion businesses, and unfortunately, sustainability subject dropped down on priority list as well. And because of the crisis, many fashion companies are looking at innovative business models just now. Next slide, please. There is also a market shift in attitudes. There's a rising awareness around climate change, and this is one of the big reasons for this. Hyper-conscious consumers are demanding more sustainable solutions, and they have vast ability actually to impact the fashion market. Next slide. So a bit of terminology. So the word sustainability, it's so overused in my opinion. It is also unfortunately a buzzword, which also is such a massive and super vague word and varies from person to person and from brand to brand. So it might be actually easier to develop narrative more around responsible fashion instead. And this is what, because I'm concentrating more on consumer behavior, I will try to focus more on this. Next slide. Circularity. It's also very important to think about circularity. When what goes around comes around. So circularity is starting and finishing at the same time when it comes to material product. It's about moving away from linear use and dispose system and instead designing products that can safely return to the biosphere when no longer wanted. Next slide. That's quite popular word as well, greenwashing. So Gen Z have high expectation on brands. They really demand real action in sustainability in fashion, not just marketing tactics such as greenwashing. So when you think about greenwashing, for example, you can think that sometimes a fashion brand can use a single sustainable project or moment to manipulate consumers into believing the brand entire value chain and ethos is ethical. This is often evident in consumer-facing initiatives like communication campaign, a fashion collection, or brand packaging, leaving other irresponsible supply details and decisions hidden, unfortunately. Next slide. So what are the challenges to sustainable fashion consumption? Next slide. Fast fashion items are particularly attractive to young consumers living on restricted budget, wanting to participate in ever-accelerating fashion trends, and who are active on users of social networks, social media. Active social media users dispose of clothing primarily because items have repeated on their social media accounts. And it was actually researched that after being pictured online with a clothing item, 1 in 10 participants would throw the item away. So that's scary. But we can think that there are some statistics on the slide from the UK from 2019, so before the pandemic, when you can think about one-time only garments, single-use outfits, well, on holidays, barbecues, festivals, weddings, of course, is a big one, 9.9 million single-use outfits. So it's giving a little bit imagination here. Next slide. The other challenge is that researchers noted a behavior gap between attitudes towards sustainability and behaviors, and it is called a cognitive dissonance. So you can imagine that if you believe that unethical fashion is wrong, but occasionally shop from unethical brands, that's cognitive dissonance. So research shows that when we behave in contradiction to our beliefs like this, we experience actual physical discomfort and mental stress. So finding ways to be consistent is the best resolution to this. However, I believe it is mainly because we want to boost our mood from time to time, and it is still not very easy and straightforward task to consume clothes in a very sustainable way, and it's required a little bit more education as well. Next slide. Furthermore, despite changes attitudes towards sustainable consumption, the complexity of the fashion industry can mean that individuals feel powerless to improve its practice, and that any change in our personal behavior would not alter the bigger picture. This is called the locus of control that plays important role here. Next slide. So besides, when we hear negative information such as environmental problems, many of us feel overwhelmed and powerless, especially in current times. We have so many other problems that have priority for us than thinking about where clothes are coming from and what to do with them if we don't longer want them. So, however, we need to remember that we are far more than just consumers and we make choices. So, even small changes in our personal habits have an effect on a larger scale. Next slide. At the same time, technology, of course, has fundamentally changed consumer behavior. Our social lives are predominantly now playing out online. Therefore, our main channel to present ourselves and shape our identity is digital. And fashion needs, of course, to stay relevant to new audience to ensure its future. Next slide. So, as necessity is the mother of invention, we can see a lot happening in the fashion space, especially from the start of the pandemic. Fashion startups are booming and brands are experimenting with innovations. And many of those innovations have potential to drive sustainability in the fashion industry. We can imagine that in a very near future, computation will be everywhere. We can see artificial intelligence resulting in better, more efficient and innovating product offering. The low cost and high quality 3D printing will alter manufacturing, and material science might change how we wear clothes. Augmented reality is already becoming a common tool for product visualization. And here, for example, you can see me trying a digital dress in an offline space. And this picture is actually from 2019 from a hot second code project by Karina Knobs. So it really seems that digital clothes are getting a momentum now. Next slide. Fashion and text looks very promising and can create a better, more convenient fashion future for everyday consumers. And it should be actually about embracing the idea of designing clothes that not only look good, but that will come with life-changing benefits. And we can notice nowadays digital models taking part in various commercials and shows now. They are never tired. They always look perfect. So that's quite making it easier for the brands. They don't need to travel, right? At least not physically. And as we see, there is a rise of virtual garments as well that I mentioned already that could be very useful for sample design, but also users can express themselves by dressing their avatars with much smaller avatars or pictures with much smaller environmental footprints. So this is regards to this showing their outfits on social networks, right? Instead of physical garments, they can try digital garments. And the life cycle carbon footprint of the production of single t-shirt from design to disposal generates 7.8 kilo CO2. And to compare it, a digital only t-shirt generates only 0.26 kilo. So reduction of more than 97% carbon impact. That's quite a lot. So we are also seeing more and more virtual fitting technologies. There is plenty of new virtual closet application appearing on the market. And thanks to this, we are able to see various statistics, like, for example, when was the item last worn, how many times, what's the cost per wear. And that's amazing because that can also be a remedy for someone who shops for pleasure, as with available data in the phone, just with one glance, we know exactly what we already have and what we really need and do not repeat and buy the same items that we just simply forgot about. So we will be able to take smarter shopping decisions thanks to technology and not buying items similar to what we already have. This can also potentially reduce shopping under the impulse and, of course, result in saving us some money. And also, I mentioned this yesterday already, that the World Economic Forum predicts that by 2030, over 10% of apparel will be connected to the internet. And this can encourage transparency within supply chain. It could also allow to follow step by step how our garments were made and maybe even find out who exactly made them. And this could highlight the role of craftsmanship and increase value of our clothes. Next slide, please. So lots happening in the fashion innovation space. So now a bit about gaming inside, as it's about intersection of those two industries. So here you can see how gaming market's revenue wave has grown over time. From the arcade boom to the rise of home console and PC gaming, the game industry quickly grew to rival and outpace film and TV. Once mobile gaming took off, the wave of revenue became an ever-growing tsunami. Next slide. So gaming is the best social media platform for brands to reach Gen Z. And mobile game market is worth actually $77 billion. There is 2.7 billion mobile gamers worldwide. And actually, the prediction of male hardcore gamer is slightly misleading now, as there is so many women playing, and they are leading on mobiles as well. And not the teenagers, actually, the women in their 40s are really big players. Next slide. Social platforms are also super popular, but actually most, if not all of them, are heavily gamified. And the line between games and social networks is starting to blur. So is it a gaming as social networks or gaming as social networks? Gaming and social networks or gaming as social networks. And collaboration and community building is really strong and important aspect, and especially now in those strange times when many of us can feel lonely, and especially with these lockdowns. Next slide. So because of all the above, we can really see fashion brands heavily adopting this segment market and use gaming to engage with audience and market to them. Many fashion brands are betting on selling skins for avatars. Here are some examples. For example, B-Bands by Burberry, which you could also play on supersized screen inside their flagship store in London before the lockdown. On the right, you can see Jane Fonda in a treehouse. That's a collaboration of Gucci and Sims for sustainable collection. Louis Vuitton and Riot Games collaborated on several fronts for the League of Legends. And you can imagine that here, outfits for avatars were sold in-game for around $10. And then after, there was a released later capsule collection, which ranged from $170 for the bandeau to $5,600 for a leather jacket. So it's really translating to the physical world. And on the right corner, there is a Dressed, which is a styling game where you can dress avatars in some high-end brands' clothes. And actually, just this week, there was announced the collaboration of Gucci and Roblox, and there was also a marketing collaboration of Animal Crossing, which you can see here. Next slide here, please. Animal Crossing and H&M for the Loop Machine, so sustainable collection. In this slide, actually, this is the slide from Animal Crossing. It's was super cool video, but I had to change it to PDF. You could actually witness a fashion show, and it was really engaging and fun. So so you can have a look even on YouTube to check it out. Next slide, please. So yes, all above is super fun. However, I strongly believe that games with its huge audience have much greater power than just be an entertainer and marketing platform. Changing patterns of behavior can be challenging. Making tools that disrupt habits and facilitates and support new collection is really important in changing clothing behavior. However, games are such a great educational and motivational tool that have huge potential to bring a positive change. And I truly believe that games can and should confront some problems also in the fashion industry. Next slide, please. So for this, it is crucial to understand how to engage audience, especially when the subject may not necessarily be a priority for them. Thus, it is important to understand types of players. Like in the fashion industry, we need to figure out who is our customer. And then we need to try to find the common points within fashion consumer types. And consumer research is also important in order to understand intrinsic motivation that arises from a sense of autonomy and emotional needs, such as mastery, knowledge, competency. Those are key elements to motivating, is also emotional engagement. Next slide. Also, fun plays a major role in engaging people, and games are fun. So therefore, it is important to define what fun is. And which category of fun would be the most suitable for the target market. Will it be easy fun, which is the vehicle for imagination, or maybe serious fun that provides meaning and value, people fun, so social bonding, or maybe hard fun, which is a mastery. Next slide. Researchers argue that only three things can change behavior in the long term. It is an epiphany, a change of environment, and taking baby steps. So the change of environment might be very interesting to examine when thinking about virtual worlds. And also small steps methods or combination of those two might be interesting to examine in a game concept. Next slide. So to start closing a gap between consumer attitudes and actual behavior, the folk behavior model might be useful. So the model shows the three elements that must be converged at the same moment for behavior to occur: motivation, ability, and trigger. And games have potential to motivate and trigger desired behaviors. Thus, I decided to concentrate currently on developing a game that main objective is to empower and influence people action towards more responsible fashion consumption. And next slide. So the game is called Portobello and it taps into the zeitgeist of secondhand and recycling to engage with Generation Z. And we are on a mission here. We want to provide a platform that accelerates the move towards share and circular economy. As I believe that it is mandatory to change the paradigm from linear to circular model in the fashion industry. Next slide. So secret to education is making it entertaining, right? I mentioned before that some people don't want to hear problems all the time and negatively about fashion. So why not make it fun and engaging? So here we aim to accelerate the move to resource efficient and circular economy by rethinking how we use clothes, consume and value, reinventing how we design, produce, sell, and dispose clothes, redefining what is possible through reuse and recycling. And we actually can make it fun. And next slide. It is also important to strengthen individual relationship with clothes, including meaning of owning or product life cycle. The game will help players to witness their own behaviors and make better alternative choices. The key to this will be various initiatives that unlock access to skills, education, and even inter-community connection. And we can learn about consumer real behavior here from such a game. We can also explore the potential of private and micro communities. It can be also a great space for exposure of some good behaviors and giving the examples from services that are working in the space. And of course, a getaway for unique personalized services. So stay tuned and for the Portobello. I hope you will be able to check our beta version soon. And in the next slide, I just wanted to thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions around the subject or simply want to connect, please do reach out. And yes, let's keep the discussion going. Thank you very much.
Here I am. Ciao,
Hello.
Marta. Hello.
Yeah, I was trying to be in this 20 minutes, so I hope I didn't speed through the presentation too much. Like,
Yeah, I
sorry
didn't
for
want
this.
to interrupt you. And so thank you very much. And I mean, you can enter the arena and of course you can meet the participants there. So if you have any questions or doubts or if you need any additional information on Portobello, you can talk to Marta in the arena.
Yes, everyone enjoy the rest of the day and tomorrow, and let's stay and play in the area in the arena then. Thanks, Anastasia. Have
Thank
a lovely
you.
day.